Welcome, Deputy Secretary General Geoană. Thank you very much for being with us here today. We're joined by many of our friends here from the Krach Institute, all leaders and operators and thinkers and innovators from across tech and business and defense and security, and all of us united really around this critical mission to make sure that technology is advancing freedom. I've so been looking forward to this conversation with us today. As many of you know, Mircea Geoană became NATO Deputy Secretary General in October of 2019. He was the first Romanian to become the DSG and the first from any of the countries that joined the alliance after the end of the Cold War. And you and the NATO alliance were pivotal partners in particular in assembling the Clean Network together, which was a worldwide effort led by our Krach Institute co-founder, Keith Krach, to secure 5G. So we thank you for that. And we're excited now to continue working together at the Krach Institute and in this mission to advance freedom. So let's talk innovation today. I saw you in Silicon Valley last week. You're in DC this week. And you're literally and figuratively bridging Silicon Valley and innovation to DC and government. That's exactly what we're focused on at the Krach Institute. So I wanted to start with the big picture here, which is we see democracies under attack across the world from authoritarians who are weaponizing technology, weaponizing innovation, not just to impact their countries and their people at home, but to export that authoritarian playbook overseas. So we see freedom at stake. And when you think about the role of NATO to safeguard allies through political and military means, you've talked about innovation being increasingly central to achieving that mission. You chair NATO's Innovation Board. You've recently launched DIANA, the Defense Innovation Accelerator Network. You now have the NATO Innovation Fund. Can you share about those programs with us? And do you see NATO becoming an innovation alliance in addition to a security alliance?
No, thank you, Michelle, and I want to thank the Krach Institute. I have a confession to make. I'm an advisor on the advisory board of the Krach Institute, so I plead guilty of succumbing to Keith Krach's incredible dynamism and very important work that the Institute is doing. Happy to see colleagues from Purdue. I look forward to visiting. That's an elite organization that is also fostering our ideas of freedom, technology, and the ecosystem of innovation. You know, when I was recruited for this job, Secretary General Stoltenberg asked me to be the champion of innovation in NATO. And it's nice to receive such marching orders. But as you know, in any big government or any big bureaucracy, agility and innovation are not always the natural instinct. But I would say something about our alliance. And if NATO is considered, for good reasons, the most successful alliance in human history, because we have in our genes the genes of adaptation and foresight. Sometimes not as quickly as we love, sometimes a little bit more complicated because we work by consensus. But nonetheless, this is an alliance that has always been in the logic of being future-proof. And of course, we have to help Ukraine win this war because this will be decisive for the way in which the world will look like. But in the meantime, we have to make sure that we are also engaging and winning the other big war, which is the war between democracy and freedom and authoritarianism and techno-dictatorships. So we have to make sure that we do Ukraine right because the world is watching. And by doing Ukraine right, we not only do right to brave people that are fighting heroically for their freedom and our values, but also because this will be a trendsetter for how the world will be organized in the future. So my job is to harness the huge innovation ecosystem across our great alliance. So happy to see Finland joining as a newest member. Sweden will come soon. And they bring to us not only strategic depth, but also an immense system of democracies, of freedom, of resilience, and innovation. And when Keith Krach, in his previous position in administration, was visiting me and Thierry Breton in European Commission, finding ways to have clean 5G networks. And by the way, Krach should be thanked by all our citizens, because what we've done through a great business leader, what was difficult to do for bureaucrats or for regular guys in government or politicians. So what am I doing, and what's Diana? Diana is a collection of 100 test centers and accelerators from all NATO countries, from beautiful Estonia to the great country of Romania, my country, all the way to Canada, the east and the west coast of America. And what I'm trying to say to my American friends and our American allies, and respecting so much the fantastic reservoir of ingenuity and technology and progress that this great country represents. In the huge competition on technological superiority and model of organizing human society with China, we will need every single piece of your allies in Europe and around the world. This will be a formidable challenge. This is the first time in centuries that we have a competitor that could really overcome and go beyond what we have managed to do. So when I go to Stanford and hopefully to Purdue, I also tell them about the university in Tallinn in Estonia. I tell them in my alma mater, University of Bucharest, Polytechnical University of Bucharest, there is a small test center on AI. In Prague, in the Netherlands, in the UK, in Canada, in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in Denmark, in Italy, in Spain, in Portugal, everywhere, in the Western Balkans, in Albania, in Croatia, in Montenegro and North Macedonia, you always find a great idea and great startups. And I think my job is to make sure that the triple helix between government, private sector, and academia are doing this thing together. We are looking for startups to use for free the Diana network. And also we have started something that I'm very pleased and very proud that I was up to the task given by my boss to be the champion of innovation. We have started an innovation fund, which is the first of its sort, a multinational sovereign venture capital fund. For the guys from Silicon Valley, sounds a little bit a contradiction in terms. It is not, because we believe that putting a little bit of seed money to the startups that have a great dual-use technological idea, and they're using Diana, putting a little bit of seed of trusted capital. Trusted capital is essential. And then that great idea and those entrepreneurs will move more mature through the Death Valley and then go to the real financing, which is real venture capital, real big tech, real defense sector, real government thing. So what we are doing, basically, we are putting to work the huge innovation ecosystem of our great alliance. Our 31, soon to be 32 allies has, as we speak, more than 50% of global GDP. We have the first 18 of the first 20 universities in the world. We have 90% of the Nobel Prize laureates in our free alliance of NATO. And if I'm adding to this our very close Indo-Pacific partners to NATO, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and by the way, I'm inviting Australian cyber and quantum companies to talk to my innovation board. And if you add also the other allies of America, treaty allies that you have, and other democracies around the world, we are a formidable force. What I think we are not doing yet good enough is on harnessing the talent of everyone in our ecosystem. And that's why I believe the Clean Network and the Krach Institute will be able, in a way, to put in a very interesting way, a sort of a very interesting way to connecting the dots. That sometimes for us, in big organizations like NATO or big governments like the US, we do it, but we don't do it with such agility and with such, flexibility that such networks. That's why I was surprised that the lawyers in NATO allowed me to be on the advisory board of the Krach Institute, because they denied me to be on the board of my Aspen Institute Romania, which I founded. So. But here, because I think our guys felt that this is something that has a very precious, catalytic and synergistic approach, and I'm very proud to serve in this. And please use me and use my organization to put our values into work. So a long answer to a simple question. We need every single freedom-loving innovation in every piece of our democratic world to be able to outcompete a formidable challenger that is China and others like China.
Well, we're very grateful that you are on our advisory board, and we'll take you up on that offer to support all of this great work. So you talked about this imperative of bringing together all of these important pieces from across the entire alliance and then even beyond in the Indo-Pacific. That means government and defense now partnering with industry and with academia and commercial startups and innovators. But you mentioned at dinner the other night that there may be some challenges with this very new way of working for governments and industry. It's a new muscle to bring all of these different players together. So far with what you've created with Diana and this massive network that you're assembling, what is the recipe for success that you've seen with partners for NATO who can bring all of these pieces together?
Listen, speaking of models of organizing human society and innovation and national security, in the 50s and the 60s, America knows this better than anyone else, 90% of all technology used for defense and national security were produced by government. And then they were trickled down to the commercial sector. And this was great, a great model, because it was the model that basically defeated Soviet Union. Because they were doing only government and keep innovation only for defense purposes. But because of the free society of America and our capitalistic world, after a few decades, the pendulum has shifted to the other side of this scale. Today, 90% of all technologies used for national security and defense are produced by the private sector. And this is great, because they have far more ingenuity, there is more money, there is more agility, there is, of course, the power of innovation that the private sector, American and other countries, do bring to the table. But I think where we are, in a way, in the midst of trying to find a new balance in this pendulum shift, how do we engage government and private sector and civil society in a way that will be more anticipatory of the big technologies to come, and not to struggle to run behind the curve, to regulate, sometimes over-regulate, sometimes panically regulating, technologies that normally we should be in the position to find about in government and in organizations from the private sector, and also for private sector to know from us, which is our anticipation of the world. So today there will be a premium on economic security, on supply chain, on defense and intellectual property. There will be on undersea critical infrastructures, on telecommunications and space. So there is an economic security dimension that will be true for every single business, not only defense, but on almost everything. So I think we'd better establish a mechanism that should be loose, cooperative, and you know, a sort of a early negotiation of new technologies to come. Because if not, there will be a temptation for politicians and Congress and administration or European Parliament or European Commission or a national parliament everywhere to overreact, overregulate just because it's a little bit late and there is a sort of a difficulty to find the balance. And I think Diana could be a nice place to try to do, because we are telling industry and private sector and academia which is the expectation from NATO. I'm launching challenges in Diana. Next time will be on energy propulsion. Industry will know through Diana which is my expectations for defense and national security use. And I think this is probably one of the answers we have to find together. Not over-regulating, because stifling innovation will be basically deadly for our success. But continuing to have this kind of disarticulated conversation about how to create innovation, new technologies, and make them work for the benefit of our free societies and outcompete our adversaries is still work in progress. I'm not saying that Diana is the answer, But I'm saying we could use Diana or the Krach Institute network to just, by practicing the muscle of talking to each other. Enemy and private sector and government are not enemies. We are essential partners for the same journey to have prosperity, freedom, and technological superiority last for many decades to come. So I think this is the most important conversation in our democracies, because the other guys have solved the problem. It's a fusion between state and business, between intelligence and military. That's one thing deciding, and they go. So we don't have the luxury of not putting to work the whole strength of our democratic world, and this is a challenge, political challenge. But I'm also appealing to the private sector. Reach out also to us early on, because you can be a help and also avoid unnecessary complications and overreactions from governments when a new technology has been developed. And I think this is something that will be a win-win proposition, good for business, good for our governments, good for our democracy, good for our freedom.
As you talk about building new muscles and new ways of working, what kind of a role does mentorship and training play as you think about Diana and helping connect some of these dual-use innovators to end users and defense and security needs?
I was very, very thrilled to receive, I think, from the Krach Institute, the news that there is also an association with the largest global mentoring, association. And I think we met
Yes.
with the CEO in San Francisco when we last met,
Yes,
Michelle.
the Global Mentor Network. Yeah.
That's great. I'm not saying that I do mentoring in NATO. I love engaging with the young ones. I'm so proud that the Young Professionals program in NATO, we had 20 positions, and we have 1,400 applications for 20 positions in NATO. And a Bulgarian girl and a Canadian lady, an American, and everyone in between, they are part of this thing. Diana is not part of the mentoring problem per se, but in fact, we are mentoring startups. And I think, and I also in Silicon Valley for StartX, which is an association, an NGO, non-for-profit, of successful entrepreneurs from the Silicon Valley ecosystem, helping younger ones with mentoring, with an advice, opening a door to a VC. And this is in a way I think we could also harness and make the life of our young innovators easier and make the rate of success higher. Of course, failure is part of the innovation part. Nobody says that everybody should be successful, but I think mentoring and investing also in leadership values, value-based leadership in our young entrepreneurs and innovators is key, because some of them are still living in a sort of a libertarian tech philosophy, which is great, but is not fitting, I think, anymore the harsh realities of today's world. So yes, mentoring, yes, leadership, yes, investing and harnessing the talent of our young ones. And also I love seeing other universities, not only Silicon Valley. Purdue is one, in Boston on biotech, in Texas and Arizona, all over. And I'm seeing the same thing in the Czech Republic, in Romania, in Estonia, and everywhere else. And by the way, we are organizing every year the NATO Industry Forum, where tech and defense are coming together to a big NATO organized event. And this will be in Sweden this fall. Some of you might be interested to coming and seeing what we do.
So what the DSG is referring to is we recently acquired an organization called the Global Mentor Network, and it's the largest virtual mentor network in the world. And the whole goal to get to what the DSG is talking about is to start now in empowering and training the next generation of tech diplomacy and innovation leaders, so that because this is such a long-term contest, we're prepared for the future. So we're going to be doing training on these very important leadership values, tech diplomacy, how you conduct tech diplomacy and tech statecraft, and then lean on the power of Purdue and its science and technology and engineering expertise to teach on these emerging and disruptive technologies that are becoming critical to our security. So very proud of that and look forward to partnering on that. Going back to Purdue a little bit, you're talking about bringing many complex parts of an ecosystem together when it comes to innovation and really getting from R&D to adoption. One of the things Purdue has done is launch a program called Purdue Innovates, and it's a united comprehensive network that brings together commercialization and IP and licensing, an incubator, Purdue Startup Foundry, and then its VC, Purdue Ventures, so that we're really shepherding the whole process from R&D to adoption. And you have this NATO network now in Diana coming together with accelerator sites and test centers. But what sort of opportunities or challenges have you seen in bringing all of these pieces together to really get dual-use innovators over to the adoption phase?
We are looking with great interest to also very innovative ways to harness these innovation ecosystems in various models. And not all models are American style. There is a different way of funding fundamental research through in Europe. There's more government money, national academies of sciences of sorts. So what we're trying to is to learn from each other, which is probably the best approach to harness not only talent in the US, but talent all over the other places. So I think working also with portions of the Purdue with us, and we are looking into some ways to segues. We call it in European English passerelles. So I would really like to bring together Purdue and Imperial College, where I have my European headquarters for Diana. I was there to open this thing. It's the NATO flagship store. It's the Chanel of, because it's the first place where NATO is behind, very protective things that we need to protect our things. It's an open thing. We are, I think, at the 8th floor. On the 4th floor is the similar thing for the UK Ministry of Defense. So when I'm saying we should try to bring, Estonia is a great example of innovation, or Finland and others. I think we should try to have a network of networks and see and learn from each other. Not everyone has the depth of venture capital markets like America, but they have banks, or they have innovation funds, funded half by government or half by the private sector. And for me, I have to make sure that the adoption idea all the way to the market is done in the fastest possible way in every single national and NATO ecosystem possible. I think there is room to find unicorns coming from Albania and to have them global unicorns. I give Albania as an example, generally. I know that in North Macedonia, or I give you, smaller size new allies, that I know there are people as smart as any of the ones in anywhere else, from Australia all the way to Canada. So I think the beauty of what you do in Purdue is the fact that you are trying to innovate yourselves around a great university, but my interest is to make sure that we have a sort of a best practices, and why not have startups from Europe come to Purdue and benefit from your ecosystem? Why not? And then venture capital from there can also fund an Albanian startup and a Romanian startup and 3 American startups. And then all of us grow, all of us become stronger, all of us can defend our freedom and democracy. That's how I see harnessing the huge convening power of NATO. That's who we are. We bring nations together in unique ways, and I think it's a pity for America, which is such a big ally in NATO, to be doing this. And we are preparing also for the Washington Summit of 2024, when NATO will be celebrating 75 years since we were created. And I think on innovation, we are ready to go aggressively in the right direction, also when it comes to decisions that our leaders will take next year.
Well, we would love to have NATO and all of our European partners at Purdue with us in the hard tech corridor of the United States. So welcome anytime. We'll get you to West Lafayette next time you're here. You mentioned the network of networks, and we love this concept, and we talk about it a lot with the Krach Institute and with NATO. And it was really the model that set us up for success in working with you and working with NATO on the Clean Network to secure 5G. I've heard you say that whether or not it's China, Iran, Russia, North Korea, one of the strategic advantages we have, or maybe the disadvantages they have, is they'll never be able to build as many friends and allies, for example, as we have with NATO. So talk to us a little bit about this network of networks and how can we use that model when it comes to not just 5G, but other emerging and disruptive technologies.
You know, when the great nation of Japan decides to spend 2% of GDP for defense, that has consequences. When a great economy like Germany decides to spend 2% of GDP for defense, it has consequences. It has very good consequences. Because number one, we shoulder America's effort to protect us. And also we invest in a bigger industrial, what we call technological industrial base. This is the new form of the old military industrial complex. We have a new ecosystem of defense, national security, technology working, I hope, in sync. So what I think that the network of networks is to making sure that we connect also with the rest of America's allies around the world. With some of them I mentioned, Indo-Pacific partners in NATO, we do a lot of common work. With others we don't. This should not stop this big network to reach out to India, to reach out to Nigeria, to reach out to Brazil, to reach out, of course, to Israel, whom we do a lot of work with, by the way, also on technology as partner of NATO. So I think we should try to see, also European Union has a big network. And when Keith was visiting his former capacity in Brussels, he was going to the Commission, seeing me and all NATO, US, and EU. When we really get our act together, my goodness, that's massive. So I see this as sort of a variable geometry, network of networks, to serve strategic purposes. And when NATO is useful, we use NATO. When there's something else beyond NATO, we use something else beyond NATO. But never lose sight of the fact that we have, in the free world, immense untapped potential to harness. And then to go to the rest of the developing world and find also a good deal for Africa. They should be part of this as well. We should go to the other parts of Asia. They should be part of this thing. Well, it's not an anti-China thing. It's a pro-democracy thing. And if we offer a real good deal to the developing world, I think they'll be more inclined not to hedge and sit on the fence, but also to say that there is also something for their citizens, because technology is not only for defense, it's also for better lives. Look at India, how they used the pandemic period to modernize telemedicine and e-learning and social services and minimum wage. Tremendous. And others do the same. So I think we have to do a network amongst our free world, but there's free world also outside of the institutionalized West. There's a free world and free citizens also all over the place. So I think we should try to do this in a way that will be engaging talent and people that are. I think freedom is a indispensable right, not only in established democracies, but also for everyone. So, yeah, network of networks and variable geometry, according to the topic, I think is something we should do. And from my side, as a NATO official, but also I myself as a big networker myself, I'm ready to put all my network of networks at the disposal of the network of networks that we are establishing together.
And together we'll have the Global Tech Trust Network. You know, it's one of the reasons why the Krach Institute with the Atlantic Council has launched the Global Tech Security Commission. And we're bringing together 12 tech sector leaders. I know NATO has 9 tech categories. We've got 12. They're all about the same. 12 tech sector leaders, 15 countries, and strategists together for a very large commission to build a global tech trust network and essentially define a playbook for the US, for NATO, for all of our allies in the Indo-Pacific and beyond to help adopt trusted tech. And so we look forward to working with you on that and building the network.
Can I mention something? We are in the process of learning the lessons of the bloody war that Russia has waged against Ukraine, and also in the fantastic way in which private sector, American and other companies, have been working and also with how much ingenuity the Ukrainians themselves are using commercial apps for winning this war. And I think it's a two-way street. We teach the Ukrainians lots of things because they are basically applying NATO doctrine and command and control. They are far more agile. Command is decentralized. People of you, many here have background in national defense and national security. You understand the difference between a Soviet command and control system and a NATO command and control system. It's two. But I think we should, and perhaps why not include some of the countries like Romania or Poland or Slovakia who are also helping a lot Ukraine, and also some of the companies that are working and experimenting in Ukraine. I think we can learn a lot about more agile acquisition processes, about how in surprising way we use relatively banal technologies for very interesting outcomes. And I think this is something I would add to this thing, because it will be, in a way, a lost opportunity for us to learn how technology in times of warfare can be put to work in a better way. So I would also add
Absolutely.
This part of Europe, because the transformation of Ukraine will go beyond the war. This will be, and I believe also for countries like Poland or Romania and the others in Eastern Europe, in Central Europe, there will be a massive transformation because of the war of how we do and operate things in that part of Europe. So I would put that small adagio to the list
Absolutely.
of the Institute.
Yeah, very critical group of countries and innovators who can help solve this contest. One of the organizing principles and things that we talk a lot about at the Krach Institute is trust. This idea of advancing trusted technology as opposed to authoritarian technology. NATO is big on trust. You're developing the principles for responsible use of artificial intelligence, things around lawfulness, responsibility, transparency, core values like integrity. How important is it that we develop a trust standard and certification when it comes to helping allies and all of those working across this network understand what trusted technology is?
This is essential. And I'm a huge proponent of building trust. I even wrote a book with the title is Trust a few years back, way before knowing that I will get to speak to such great audience. I mentioned NATO as a exceptionally important convening platform. NATO is also the gold standard in standard setting in the world when it comes to defense and security. So now, as we are working for communications in NATO, for cyber defense in NATO, for adoption of new technologies in NATO, the standards that we are adopting are in themselves a catalyst for building trust. When we adopted our AI and big data strategy a few months back, we have a big portion of responsible use attached to that. This has consequences, because on that piece of policy, I have 31 countries already agreeing. I have 31 capitals adopting that standard. And we'll do this for every big, what we call foundational technologies. We're now working on the quantum strategy at NATO that will have responsible use attached to that. I'm working on a biotech policy in NATO that will have a responsible use, propulsion, human enhancement, new materials, name it. And of course, our list is never rigidly stopping to 9 technologies. We identify those. We have a huge operation, which is the NATO chief scientist. We have more than 5,000 researchers in the NATO chief scientist organization in NATO. Dr. Brian Wells is our chief scientist in NATO. I encourage the ones who are doing more fundamental research. That's a tremendous network. They're also building trust. We have to do much better in having young women in tech, in STEM education. This is something, my alma mater in Bucharest, we are very proud. I talked to the rector and to the freshman year today at my alma mater, there are 48% girls or young women that are applying to become engineers in Romania. In other countries, it's 12, 13%. So there's also a matter of trust and a matter of bringing more young women and young girls to be exposed to these things. It's a pity, and that's also trust. We are also developing standards on climate change and security. That's important. And on June 21st, I just met John Kerry himself, our Secretary General, and Frans Timmermans from the Commission are meeting in Brussels. And we go to COP28 in the Emirates with the idea of a compact on climate change and security. We're not dealing with climate change, others do, but security consequences of climate change, this is also trust building. So I'm a little bit making a commercial about what we do, but we take this very seriously. Because in the end, we are an alliance of democracies. And the trust of our citizens is the indispensable foundation for everything we do. We are great in this, we are great in that, we'll be even greater in that. But if we miss the rendezvous, the trust of our citizens, sooner or later this alliance will not be as successful as we used to be. And this is something that we take very seriously. And that's why we engage so enthusiastically in initiatives like these, because they serve the fundamental purpose of freedom, of democracy, of rule of law, which the Washington Treaty, my constitutional, Judge Sullivan is here, he knows about law, that's who I am. I'm a value-based organization where trust is the heart of everything we do.
And we thank you for that, for putting those values and that trust right at the core of our partnership together. I think I have time for two more questions. So I want to look toward the future with these last two. Innovation happens in real time, but you've also referred to this contest between authoritarianism and between democracy as a long-term one. It's a marathon. It is the contest of the 21st century. That can be a challenge for us here, especially in the United States, right? Our political system is on 2- and 4-year cycles. When it comes to business leaders and CEOs, we're thinking on quarterly time horizons. What advice do you have for business leaders, for political leaders, for new commercial innovators in starting to think long-term about real-time innovation so that we win this contest for the 21st century?
That's a very important question. I'm not giving advice to anyone. I barely have enough advice for myself. But I would do the following thing. And I think your global network could be a very great use to experiment that. I mentioned earlier that we need to find a new relationship of trust between private sector and governments and international organizations like NATO. That's a must. As we are sending demand signals to industry about what is to come, and that's good for business, there will be more interest for young, small, or huge companies to listen to what's coming next, just because that's good for business. So I see a growing interest for deep tech, more patient capital formation. In big and small corporations, I had at my innovation board a more patient defense-related venture capital from Toronto, Canada. So I think there is this indispensable relationship of trust between government, NATO, and private sector would lead to a more homogeneous view of the world in the making, and the expectations of governments and NATO to security. And this is where I think I will never change American desire for quick results. This is not the point of changing culture. It would be a pity. But I think we can think of doing things that are a little bit longer term, still driven by concrete results, because shareholders and customers expect that. But I would encourage something that is a bit longer term, more patient, and educated by a constant conversation with government and entities like NATO or European Union for that matter. I think we'll be better informed. We'll take business decisions that will be influenced to a certain degree by this discussion. Also, governments will learn from you guys. I was in Silicon Valley meeting a big, huge tech company. I don't mention the name because I do commercials in NATO. And they went to the meeting at the White House on discussion on AI and all these complications. And I asked, how did it go? And they said it was constructive. Okay, not bad. Okay. We should make this not always something for the level of the White House. That's big, huge. We have to make it at the grassroots level. We should discuss amongst each other on every single occasion, like a great occasion like this one. It's also part of this listening to each other and listening from a big organization like NATO, what's our expectation for the future. So I think that will be a way for us to outcompete the ones who are more, longer term culture than the short sprint term. You cannot become from a sprinter a marathon runner, but you can start by running from 110 yards to 500 and then eventually go to run the marathon in New York or in NATO or wherever.
For my last question, in taking it from White House level down to the grassroots, today is graduation day at Purdue. And it's Go Purdue. And it's graduation week for many universities in the United States. I know you're doing a commencement speech later this weekend. But Purdue's about to graduate, I think, almost 10,000 students, 3,000 of them engineers. So you're about to have 3,000 engineers in the workforce starting today. And they might not necessarily be thinking about their role as innovators and engineers when it comes to diplomacy or foreign policy or national security. But what would be your message to them, given the vital role that they could and should play in winning this 21st century contest for democracy?
I have a massive interest and almost an obsession in investing in young leaders. That's why I started the Aspa Institute in Romania. We have close to 2,000 fellows and alumni of our programs, including a Deputy Defense Minister of Ukraine. He came to me, Mr. Geoană, thank you so much, you changed my life. I attended the Aspa Romania leadership program. So when I'm talking to young ones, of course, they look at older guys or government or big organizations with a little bit of skepticism. That's normal. But there is a huge, genuine, generous, motivational and inspirational beauty in our young ones from Purdue or from Romania. That if you go and reach out to them young and try to explain in a credible way without preaching on them, just engaging with them, they have a tremendous capacity to understand the challenges of today and tomorrow's world. And not only for climate change, for technology risks, for the ethics and trust that are coming with this. So the only recipe, to my knowledge, is to engage early on. And I know they will respond positively. The 3,000 engineers from Purdue, with a little bit of work and a little bit of exposure to these kind of conversations, it's their future. They'll have kids and grandkids. I hope I'll have grandkids from my kids too. So reach out, engage. Try to be humble. Don't preach on them. Go and listen to them. And of course, I'm just one guy, and we are not, we cannot cover the ground, but all of us, through mentoring programs, going and teaching a short class in one, not all huge universities, in a small college, someplace, we'll be doing our mission. And they will respond positively. And this is at least my empirical answer from what I do. I see how they respond positively when you say, listen, this is the problem we have. We need you to fix the problem of the world of today and tomorrow. They're wonderful kids, and they are our pride. And congratulations for such a great university and such great education you give to so many young ones.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to share that message with them so that gets to them. And I think working together with NATO, with the Krach Institute, we can reach them and other youth across the country, across the alliance, and across the world to help build this next generation of freedom and tech diplomacy leaders. So, Deputy Secretary, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for joining us. With your leadership, your optimism, and your fortitude, I think we're headed on a really good path. We appreciate all of your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you all.